Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Stacia and I'm just a girl on the internet that likes to watch movies. And this week's movie is going to be the 1942 classic Casablanca. I mean, who hasn't heard of Casablanca? Even if you're younger, I'm sure that you've heard of Casablanca. You might not have seen it. And if you haven't, it is a shame. I don't know anybody who hasn't watched Casablanca who has not absolutely loved it. But we've all heard of it. We've all heard the classic line, "Here's looking at you, kid. Play it again, Sam," even though he doesn't say that in the movie. So this week's going to be a nice, simple, easy. Let's talk about Casablanca. This movie's two main stars are, of course, Humphrey Bogart playing the character of Rick, and Ingrid Bergman playing Ilsa. You also have Paul Henreid playing Victor Laszlo, and Claude Rains playing Captain Louis Renault. And it is a World War II movie taking place, of course, in Casablanca, Morocco. And of course, there are loads of other people that star in this movie. Part of what makes this movie so special is the supporting cast in this movie. Even small roles are played to the nines by the supporting cast. Interesting little roles that come in and out of the storyline that bring it all together so perfectly. Now, Humphrey Bogart's character, Rick, is like a cynical American who owns a cafe in Casablanca called the American. And his journey in this movie is to decide whether or not to help his former lover, Ingrid Bergman's character, Ilsa, and her fugitive husband, Victor Laszlo, escape the Nazis in French Morocco. And he is kind of built up this persona of not caring whether or not getting himself involved in the political matters of the day. But you'll soon find out that he actually, beneath this hard exterior, he does have a soft spot that shines through several times in the movie by helping lots of people get out. And Casablanca is directed by Michael Curtiz. It's written by a whole host of characters. It was still being written while the movie started shooting, which is usually a recipe for disaster, that it won't work. But somehow all of that comes together and you have one of the best movies of all time. I think this and Citizen Kane are right up there with, in a lot of people's opinions, of the best movies ever made, especially movies coming out of old Hollywood. And Oscar-wise, this was nominated for a whole slew of Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Writing Screenplay, Best Lead Actor, Best Lead Actress, Best Cinematography Black and White, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. So it was nominated for 8 Academy Awards in total. And of all these categories, it wins 3 of them, which of course, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Writing, which, like I've said, is quite an accomplishment considering how the writing went for this movie. At the time when Casablanca was made, it was made for just under $1 million, which was a huge amount to make a movie for. But it did make over $4.7 million at the box office, which was considered a huge success at the time. Part of the reason why it cost so much to make is probably because there were a lot of problems behind the scenes getting this movie to the screen. During filming, besides the writing taking forever, like I said, they were still writing this movie when it started filming. Some of it was just written on the set. The most famous line of "Here's looking at you, kid," and the beginning of a beautiful friendship, that was written almost on the spot as it was being filmed. Part of what caused Casablanca to go so far over budget, and it was over budget by quite a lot, that's why it cost so much for a film made in 1942. It was also filmed in sequential order instead of order when they had certain sets ready, because the second half of the movie wasn't even done and ready for filming. I mean, the entire film was shot in a studio, except for some sequences of the movie. Part of the problem was actually the height difference between Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart is on the shorter side and Ingrid Bergman was on the taller side. So if you watch the movie, you can really tell in certain scenes the height difference plays back and forth, like they were constantly adjusting for the height difference. Unlike nowadays, where it's more acceptable, in my opinion, for there to be a shorter man and a taller woman. Back then, it definitely wasn't deemed acceptable and really took a shot out of somebody, you know, like Humphrey Bogart, who was seen as such a manly man at the time. The first choice to direct this movie was actually William Wyler. He was unavailable, so that's how Michael Curtiz became the director of this film. In 1989, the film was put on the National Film Registry for preservation because of its cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. And the 1989 National Film Registry was the first year that they actually did that. So it's one of the inaugural class of that Film Preservation Society. And the music in this movie, it has some of the most iconic songs in it as well, from It Had to Be You, Love for Sale, and of course, As Time Goes By. And at the time of its initial release, Casablanca got almost universal glowing reviews. The New York Times said the Warners have a picture that makes the spine tingle and the heart take a leap. The sentiment, humor, and pathos with taut melodrama and bristling intrigue, devious convolutions of the plot. He praised the quality of the screenplay as of the best, and the cast performances are all of the first order. Variety at the time said it was a combination of fine performances, engrossing storytelling, and neat direction. A variety of moods, action, suspense, comedy, and drama that makes Casablanca an A1 entry at the box office. Although it wasn't totally universal praise, the New Yorker rated Casablanca as pretty tolerable and said it was not quite up to Across the Pacific, which was Bogart's last spy-ish type film. And it is also worth noting that Casablanca is a World War II movie that came out during World War II. It wasn't the first World War II movie produced, but it kind of threads a fine line in movie making. It's not overly critical of the Nazis, but does subtly take jabs at them, and you are fully aware of the dangers of being wanted by the Nazis. America at this time had just been drawn into the war when they started making this film as well. Pearl Harbor had only happened in December of 1941. So production started in early of 1942. So they were trying to thread that fine line, because when America first got into World War II, we were more doing it for the sake of the Japanese attacking us instead of the Nazis. And Casablanca is actually an enduring success at the box office. Besides being a hit when it was first released, when it made over $4 million at the box office, before you had home video and everything, they would re-release a lot of these older movies back into the movie theaters, where by the 1960s, when it was being released, it had made almost $7 million at the box office, which is fabulous for movies at that time. If you look at box office history, and when really pictures started making these overwhelming amounts at the box office, that didn't really happen until the 1970s and beyond, the 1980s really taking over the blockbuster movie. But considering the cost to produce a movie back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even 60s, when they made these, seemingly to our eyes today, these paltry sums at the box office, it was actually so much money. They made so much money. And going into the film lore, like I said before, I think everybody is familiar, even if you haven't seen Casablanca, for Play It Again, Sam. And I alluded to, that's never actually said in the movie. What is actually said is, you played it for her, you can play it for me. If she can stand it, I can. Play it. The Play It Again, Sam is often done in a lot of spoofs of the movie, kind of a shorter way to get the point crossed. And going back into how remarkable that the script of this movie actually is, after finding out that it was still being written while the movie was being made. In 2006, the Writers Guild of America named Casablanca's screenplay the best screenplay of all time. So sometimes what seems like situations that will definitely not make something work just makes it work and come together. This film was not released in Germany until 1952. And at the time, a heavily censored version of the movie was released in Germany without any references to Nazism in the film. The version that was released in the 50s in Germany is almost 30 minutes shorter than the actual runtime of the film. It wasn't until the 1970s when Germans in Germany were allowed to see the original version of the movie. And it's kind of hard to believe by today's standards, but this film did run into trouble with the production code, or the Hays Code, as a lot of us know it. Joseph Breen of the Production Code Administration opposed the suggestions that Captain Renault extorted sexual favors from his supplicants, and that Rick and Ilse had slept together in Paris. Extensive changes had to be made, with several lines of dialogue being removed or altered from the original dialogue. All direct references to sex had to be deleted. Renault's selling of visas for sex and Rick and Ilse's previous sexual relationship were implied rather than referred to explicitly. Also, in the original script, when Sam plays As Time Goes By, Rick remarks, "What the blank are you playing?" The line implied a curse word and had to be removed according to the production code. Casablanca was based on a play by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison. The play was unproduced. It was called Everybody Comes to Rick. And if you know anything about the production code and you've seen this movie, spoiler alert, Ilse and Rick don't end up together. She kind of had to stay with her husband because the production code would have not allowed her to leave her husband for Rick. And Casablanca was also a movie in the 1980s that got hit by the colorization craze of the day. Ted Turner, although known for the preservation of classic movies, he had this thing with wanting to colorize classic movies in the 1980s and had his company develop a process to impart color in some of the classic movies. And his motives were virtuous. He was trying to bring these movies to a new audience that even to this day, people avoid some black and white movies because of the perceptions that it's black and white, it'll be boring, I won't like it. And so he thought, well, if we colorize these films, then more people will watch them. Which, like I said, he had the best intentions, but to a lot of people, film is considered an artistic work, especially to the filmmakers themselves. So you do not mess with art. And so by the late 80s, early 90s, the colorization process was kind of ditched. But we all know you can find those colorized versions still. They're still available. And I think they are probably a lot more popular now to see the colorized version than it was when they first came up with the colorized process. I think It's a Wonderful Life is a prime example. A lot of people like watching the colorized version of It's a Wonderful Life, even Miracle on 34th Street. Casablanca, not so much. I haven't seen so much of the colorized version of it. And one young person, people in their 20s and 30s, when they see Casablanca, they actually, if they give it a chance, actually really, really like the movie. So it's not that young people have poor taste in movies. They just need to be given a chance to see these older movies, I believe. And when they really, really give them a chance, more often than not, when it's considered a classic and universally loved by people, they actually like these movies. So thank you for joining me this week. If you have never seen Casablanca by some weird circumstance, I encourage you to watch this movie. You'll love it. If you are a film lover, you need to watch Casablanca. It is one of the most beloved movies ever made, and there is a reason for it. Especially if you're a lover of film or a new lover of film where you're younger, you need to give these older movies a chance. Again, my name is Stacia, and like I said, I'm just a girl on the internet that likes to watch movies. I like to talk about movies and share movies with people. My goal this year is to try to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of June. Last year, my goal was to get to 500, and I got to over 650. So I think I can make it to 1,000 subscribers. And if you like this type of content and you love film just like me, I encourage you to subscribe. And I encourage you to comment. I love when you guys comment and share your stories with me about your experiences with these movies. And in some cases, with your experience with the stars of these movies. I've had a couple of people comment on knowing certain people that are in these movies or who made these movies. I love when you share the experiences of when you first watched these movies and what you thought, you going to the movie theater, or if you watched it on a home video. I love those type of comments, and it always helps me when you give me a thumbs up too. So I encourage you to subscribe, comment, and give me a thumbs up. And if you know other people who like movies like I do and like you do, share this content with other people. Get our small community going. I love the small community that we're building here. I want to thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you next week. Love you all. Bye.